Archaeology, places in Israel that have been uncovered that prove the Bible is true. And some of these sites are magnificent. Today we're going to see archaeological discoveries of synagogues where Jesus taught in, where the tomb of Jesus supposedly was, and where he was crucified. We're going to see the Pool of Siloam, the Pool of Bethesda, Hezekiah's Tunnel, and the amazing Caesarea Maritime. Join us today as we continue with our Puzzled by the Bible series, where we can see how archaeology helps us really learn to trust the Bible. All right, good morning. Welcome to our Women's Bible Study. If you are new, we are very, very glad you're joining us today, here or online, however you found us. What I'm going to tell you right now is worth coming to Bible study today. If you learn nothing else, this you're going to learn. This happened over Thanksgiving. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. My thought was, I'm glad it's over. Can't wait till Christmas is over. Got kind of a Grinch, apparently. This made me laugh. So over the break, my mom, her aunt, my mom is 90, my mom's aunt died, and she was 106 years old. I just kill me way beyond that. Okay. But anyway, so we go to her celebration of life, and her son gets up and says this. He said, if you want to know why my mom lived so long, he said, I have no answers for that, none. Here's why. She never worked out. Amen. Okay. She never drank water. Get a load of that. She drank orange juice, and here you go, hot chocolate, boom. All right. She ate ice cream and chocolate sauce. All she wanted was desserts, and she had a glass of wine every night, and she lived to 106. So, for those of you that don't like my eating habits, back at you, okay? But then what made me laugh after that was I thought, okay, here's the problem. I don't want to live to 106. So I might have to start eating healthy and drinking water just so I could die early. So that's my new theory in life. Okay, we are one lesson away from finishing our Puzzled by the Bible series. Can't wait for that next week. We did this series because we want people to be unpuzzled by the Bible so that when they read it, they'll want to read it, and then they will actually understand it and trust that everything in the Bible are the very words of God that he uses for us to live life. But if we're not reading it, we're going to have a hard time through life. Now, we have talked about Bible timelines. We've talked about the big picture of the Bible. We've talked about Bible translation and manuscripts and prophecy. And in our last lesson, we showed you archaeological evidence from the Old Testament. And what we're going to do this week is do archaeological evidence from the New Testament. Now, I think today you're going to love this lesson, especially if you're someone who questions the Bible, someone who needs assurance that the Bible is true. And one of the ways that we can be helped with that is looking at archaeology, because for some reason that just helps us. Because we have to ask the question, is there evidence where the Bible says certain things happened? And the answer is yes, there is. So what we start here is saying archaeology helps us prove that the history we read in the Bible is actually true. So let's start with my one and only joke today, because this is my favorite day. I talk for 15 minutes, you watch videos for the rest. It's kind of like that day when you go to school and your teacher plays a movie, it's like, that was the funnest day. So this is what it's going to look like today. Here's my one and only joke. All right. Hopefully this is not how you're going to feel today. A pastor, known for his kind of lengthy sermons, noticed a man get up and leave during the middle of his sermon. And then the man returned right at the conclusion of the church service. Afterwards, the pastor went up and said, "Are you okay? I noticed you got up and leave, and then you came back." He said, "Where did you go?" And he goes, "I went to get a haircut." And the pastor said, "Well, why didn't you do it before the service?" And he goes, "Because I didn't need a haircut then." That's how long it was. So there you go. Hopefully you don't feel that way today. All right. Jesus starts his ministry about 30 AD. He's teaching in synagogues throughout Galilee. Here is Matthew 4:23. Jesus went throughout Galilee teaching in the synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness among the people. So what I want to start off with is I want to show you some of these synagogues that have been unearthed under the ground. Because unearthing a synagogue is kind of a really big deal. Because according to this verse, if it was around Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee, you can be pretty certain that Jesus taught there, because Jesus tells us that he went through Galilee and taught in synagogues. Now, one of the greatest finds was found about 15 years ago. Now, we're talking 15 years ago. 2,000 years ago, this existed, and we just found it 15 years ago. And what they found was not only a synagogue, but an entire town. And the town is called Magdala. And this town is the hometown of Mary Magdalene. Here is a map right here. You can see the Sea of Galilee at the very top. Right around the Sea of Galilee is where Jesus taught a lot. Magdala is right there to the left of the Sea of Galilee. Now, this town was buried underground for 2,000 years. In 1960, there was this small little resort right on the Sea of Galilee, had 50 little bungalows on it, and it was a popular destination for Israelis during the summer to go. I think it was called like the Hawaiian Village or something, like really on the Sea of Galilee in Israel. That's what they called it. So in 2004, there were plans to build this serene gathering place for Christians right on the Sea of Galilee, because this is where most of Jesus' ministry took place and he did miracles. So they found this particular land here. The plans were to knock down the cabins, put a hotel there with 300 rooms, a restaurant, a lakeside center for prayer and contemplation. The building permits came through in 2009. Okay, so we're talking not very many years ago. But in Israel, you're going to hear this a lot today. There's something called IAA, the Israeli Antiquities Authority. So if anyone wants to build anything in Israel, you have to have the Israeli Antiquities Authority, say that 20 times, and they have to come in first and do a salvage dig to make sure that there's nothing under the ground before you start digging. So when they put their first little scoop in to get something out, they were shocked to find this entire city right below this. The city of Magdala, where this amazing synagogue was found. So here you go, here it is.
Hi, I'm Jeremy.
Hello, Jeremy. I'm Jennifer.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Well, welcome to Magdala, the ancient first century Jewish town.
Thank you.
And we have an active archaeological dig going on right as we speak.
I'm looking forward to seeing everything.
Well, why don't I show you around?
Great, let's go.
Okay.
This is an active archaeological site. About 3 months out of the year, they're working on uncovering new things. Universities send volunteers. Every couple of weeks, they rotate out. Recently, they found an incense shovel dating to the Second Temple period, Herod's period, the time of Jesus. So there's a lot going on right now.
Yes,
Okay.
we have pilgrims coming in every day.
So what do we have here, Jennifer?
This is a first century synagogue in the Galilee area. It's one of 7 first century synagogues that we find in Israel. Actually, many call it the Pompeii of Israel because of the beautiful design of the mosaic, the frescoes. It's very well preserved. And we have many different treasures inside.
Okay, now I noticed the entryway here. These stones look like they're Herodian. They've got the edges on them.
Exactly. We actually found those entrance stones in a corner in the synagogue, which was very curious, and with different clues have led us to the conclusion that the people themselves took apart their synagogue before the Romans came in the year 67 AD.
And what do we have a little bit further in?
Well, we can walk in here to the Bet Midrash.
Okay.
So this would be the place of study. And inside the Bet Midrash, you have a stone with little nooks there that you can put the scrolls. So inside the Bet Knesset, the second part of the area, there's a little room there that's blocked off by limestone, and that would be the Aron Kodesh. So the scrolls would be stored there. They can get out the scrolls and open them up and set them here.
So you would use those nooks to rest the wooden, what we would call dowels, to rest those there to hold it open.
Yes.
Okay. So now we're standing inside of the synagogue, and what are we standing on and around?
Well, these are the seats that go all the way around. There would have been 3 columns on this side, 3 columns over here. Strangely, the columns are missing, but if you go kitty corner to the synagogue, there's a blockade to the marketplace. And there we find all the columns for the synagogue. And then the people could also sit all the way around the edge. So you could fit about 150 people in here. In the first century, it would have been both men and women.
Okay.
It's believed that they weren't separated at that time.
Okay.
It was a thrill to be able to sit really on the same seats that some of the first century Christians and believers in Christ sat in.
Now, toward the back of the room, we have this stone down there. What can you tell us about that stone?
This is a one-of-a-kind archaeological wonder and one of the first significant finds. Ironically, or you could say by God's providence, when the Israeli antiquity authorities came in to do their initial digs, they dug right over top of this. So this is the first thing they found, and then digging it out around and around, they discovered it's in the middle of a synagogue. Many symbols on this stone give us a schematic model of the temple where we have different objects we find in the hall, to the holies, to the deepest part of the temple, the Holy of Holies.
Isn't that beautiful? It's so amazing. It's so amazing. But here's what I want you to see all today. The Bible is backed up by archaeology, and we're finding more and more archaeological sites today. And a lot of it's because, remember, it was in 1940, 46, 48, when Israel became a state, 48, and then in 1967 they took over Jerusalem. 67, did I get that right? Jerusalem. Yeah, I'm bad at numbers. And so now it's opened up to where we can go in and dig. We weren't able to do that before, and now we are. So we're finding all of these. I act like I'm there, don't I? I was laughing. I thought, I want to be an archaeologist minus the heat, the work, all that. I just want to go find something. That's what I want. All right, so here you go. Next one let's look at is a place called Chorazin. This is another synagogue that was found. It's right up north of the Sea of Galilee right there. So watch this.
Just above Capernaum, on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, rise these rolling hills of black basalt rock and grasslands. These hills produced a naturally growing wheat that was famous throughout the Galilee region. Chorazin sprang up during the 1st century AD as an agricultural village known for processing this wheat. Chorazin was connected to Capernaum by a popular road used by the Jewish people. I'm a little over 2 miles above the north end of the Sea of Galilee at an ancient site called Chorazin. Chorazin was a Jewish town that Jesus visited during his teaching ministry in the Galilee region. Now, in modern times, Chorazin has become a large archaeological site that has been divided into roughly 5 major sections. First, you had the town square. These are the remains of a typical home. Then you had the wheat threshing area. This is the olive press area. And this, the local synagogue. Now, Jewish synagogues were an important part of the Jewish community. Not only were synagogues religious houses of prayer, but they were also general assembly halls for political events, town meetings, and even parties. Chorazin is mentioned in the Gospels as a place that Jesus visited from time to time, teaching in the synagogue and healing the sick. However, Jesus didn't have anything good to say about the people's response to his message here. He said they were among the worst of the worst. Woe to you, Chorazin! If the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. Matthew 11:21.
Isn't that fun? So you can kind of see the place now. When you read that in the Bible, you'll be like, oh, I remember that, the black basalt and all that stuff. But these are just literal places that are, they're archaeological sites that we can say, this is where Jesus would have walked and taught. We'll do one more really quick one right here. Capernaum, that is, you can see Chorazin up top, and then Capernaum. This is Peter's hometown. This particular synagogue is really beautiful. It's not actually the synagogue where Jesus would have preached, because this was built later. He'll show you that. But we've been to Israel 4 times, and we've been to this site 4 times, and never once did I ever see, to my recollection, the actual dig below. So watch this.
The synagogue, which we're in right now, and we're doing this video in, was actually built by a centurion. Now, the actual synagogue you're seeing is not the original one in which Christ preached. This was built later on because it's been close to 2,000 years. The original one sits over to my left, your right, and it's been built on top. This one has been built on top of it. But anyway, the synagogue where Christ preached was actually built by a Roman centurion. And let's just read a little bit about him. It says in Luke 7:5, it says regarding this centurion, "For he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue." So this Roman centurion, this Gentile, built the actual synagogue where Christ preached.
Yeah, I'd love to see the ruins before there, but down on the ground, the black stuff. All right, so Jesus is now going through towns. He's teaching in synagogues. He's healing people along the way. So what I want to show you next is the Pool of Siloam. This is where Jesus heals a blind man. Now, this week we're doing New Testament finds, but the Pool of Siloam actually has its roots in the Old Testament, and now that you guys are all really proficient in timelines and Bible timelines, this is going to make sense to you. Let me show you a picture really quick. This is in the days of Jesus, and this is like a model. So what we see is Herod's temple would be up there in the top right. There's kind of like this walkway thing, and then down here there's the Pool of Siloam. Here's another cool picture of it, and you can kind of see the Pool of Siloam down there. This is kind of what it would look like in the days of Jesus. So I want to give you a real quick history lesson so you can see how amazing this site is. The Pool of Siloam, it dates back to, remember when we did our timeline, remember the period of the kings. Now we had Solomon's son, the kingdom split. So when the northern kingdom, the king Sennacherib, he's an Assyrian king, he came, remember, and he took over the northern kingdom of Israel, just wiped them away, hauled them all away, they're all gone, and that's what he did. He wanted to come down and take over the southern kingdom, but God miraculously stopped it. Hezekiah was the king down here in the south. Here, I'll show this picture here. This makes more sense. The blue Assyrians conquered, hauled away all the Jews. Below, you see this is where Jerusalem is. And so King Sennacherib came back down to take over. But then, like I said, Hezekiah prayed and God saved Jerusalem. Now, what happened was the Assyrians were coming down to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, they had a water source from the Gihon Springs, and it fed water into Jerusalem, and it made everything really lush. But because Hezekiah knew that this Assyrian king was coming to take them over, he didn't want them to see all the outside water outside the city, because then he was afraid that they would come through the water channels to get into the city to destroy them. So he rerouted the water. Now watch this. In the 8th century BC, King Hezekiah built a 1,750-foot long tunnel connecting the Gihon Spring with what? The Siloam Pool, which is what we're going to talk about, in an effort to block the water source from the invading Assyrians and direct it into Jerusalem. This is fascinating. Watch this.
And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was coming and that he was determined to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the springs which were outside the city, and they did help him. So there gathered a large group of people together, and they stopped up all the springs in the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, "Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water?"
We are now at the Gihon Spring. It contains an enormous amount of water.
Prior to Hezekiah's rule, all this water flowed outside the city through irrigation channels to the fields of the people and to the king's gardens.
When he prepared Jerusalem for the Assyrian siege, Hezekiah worried that the mighty army of Assyria would camp outside the city walls, gaining access to the city's water source.
He decided to prevent their use of the water by blocking and sealing the springs outside the city, including the Gihon Spring. He diverted the spring's water into an underground tunnel which had been quarried into the heart of the mountain. Two groups of masons worked towards each other from both sides and met in the middle of the tunnel. and the water flowed from the source to the pool. The tunnel ends at the Pool of Siloam, which was inside the city, behind protective walls. The account of this engineering wonder is mentioned explicitly in the Bible and is also documented in the Shiloach inscription, which was discovered 6 meters from the end of the tunnel.
This is a copy of the inscription written in ancient Hebrew letters. It describes the dramatic moment when the two groups met inside the tunnel.
The masons were swinging their axes one towards the other, and they heard the voice of one man calling his fellow. And on the day of the tunneling, the masons bore through, one man towards his fellow, axe upon axe, and the water flowed from the source to the pool for 1,200 cubits.
Some of you have been to Israel. Has anyone ever been there? Yes. Did you go through it? Did you have claustrophobia? Yeah. Don't ever go if you have claustrophobia, just so you know. It is literally like the walls, and it's very tight. And I told Rob, I said, if there's an earthquake, we're dead. This is our tomb. It was terrible, but it was fascinating, wasn't it? It's a fascinating place. So the Gihon Spring is a big deal, and then it flows through the city down into the Pool of Siloam, which is what we're going to look at today. Now, in 2004. While repairing a sewage line, the Jerusalem Gihon Water Company found additional steps to the Pool of Siloam. Subsequently, here's our IAA, began a systematic evacuation uncovering the northern and some of the eastern sides of the pool. So my whole point is, not only does this prove the Hezekiah's tunnel and the Pool of Siloam that they're just finding, here's a picture here of some of the steps, it shows us even in the New Testament that this was all going on, that there was an actual pool of Siloam when Jesus was here, because this is where he healed the blind men. So watch this.
Located at the bottom of the city of David is the Pool of Siloam, one of the most important places in ancient Jerusalem.
This is a site where all of the Jewish people would gather 3 times a year for Pentecost, Tabernacles, and Passover to immerse, spiritually cleanse themselves before the pilgrimage up to the temple.
These steps were uncovered in 2004, but when the pool is fully excavated on the other side of this wall, it will mark the first time in modern history when the Pool of Siloam has been fully excavated and open to the public.
So now there is a groundbreaking. We are really in historic times. Really, 2 weeks ago, we have received the okay to start digging. For many years, since 2004, when we discovered this site. And now, after 18 years later, we are finally able to excavate. Our tractors have started excavating the Pool of Siloam, meaning in a short year, 2 years, we'll be able to come here and see the full Pool of Siloam in its entirety.
This video shows what the pool might have looked like as Jews purified themselves and walked up to the temple. The Bible explains how King Hezekiah built the pool in Chronicles and 2 Kings. Now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah, all his might, and how he made a pool and a tunnel and brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? The book of John describes how Jesus healed the blind man near the pool. When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, "Go wash in the Pool of Siloam." So he went and washed and came back seeing. Weisman says the pool links the people of the Bible.
All of the biblical stories, you want to meet David and Solomon, Hezekiah, the kings, the stories of Isaiah, of Jeremiah, they're here. And this is literally the water system, the life source of that Jerusalem.
Isn't that amazing? Yay. So all this is to say this. The Bible is backed up by archaeology, so we need to really understand that. Then something else was found in 2004, and like I said, this is all pretty recent. We're talking 21 years ago, and this is so amazing. So watch this. Remember how the Pool of Siloam is down here on the bottom, and that walkway that goes up into the temple. Remember, if you were a Jew coming from another place, you're going to go down, wash in the Pool of Siloam, walk up some steps, and go in and worship in the temple. So watch this. This is so cool.
They call it the biblical superhighway, the pilgrim's path that led to the Jewish temple in ancient times.
The places and events and the peoples that make Jerusalem, Jerusalem, for Christians, for Jews, It all happened here in the city of David. This is where the beating heart of Jerusalem is. We're talking about the Pool of Siloam. We're talking about Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount. We're talking about the city of David. The pilgrimage road links them all together.
For Jews in ancient days, their pilgrimage began here at the Pool of Siloam. It's a mikveh or ritual bath. It's the size of 2 Olympic swimming pools. They would purify themselves here before going up to the Temple Mount to worship God.
The historian Josephus says that 2,000 years ago, on the pilgrimage festivals, there would have been more than 2 million people going up on pilgrimage. That's a lot of people who need to bathe.
The pool is also where Jesus healed the blind man, as recounted in the book of John. Its location was hidden by a road until 15 years ago, when a sewage leak led to excavations, the discovery of the pool, and much more.
The archaeologists, when they find the Pool of Siloam, so they understand if that's the pool, and they know where the temple stood on the Temple Mount some 2,000 years ago, the same Temple Mount as today.
Zev Orenstein with the City of David Foundation says archaeologists wondered how the pilgrims traveled from the pool to the Temple Mount.
So the archaeologists widened the excavation, and we are standing on the very answer to that question. We are standing atop the ancient pilgrimage road.
These are the stones that Jesus would have walked on his way up to the temple. And now the significance of the excavation of the pilgrimage road is that for the first time in 2,000 years, visitors will be able to walk all the way from the Pool of Siloam up to the Western Wall.
The word in the Bible, the Hebrew words, is aliyah l'regel, or ole regel. Now what we understand that to mean is it's a spiritual ascent. You're going up to the temple, going to Jerusalem. It's a very holy place. But Chris, when you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life. Because as we're walking right now, and I'm sure you could feel it, we're walking uphill.
And it was more than that.
This would have been like Times Square. You would have had on both sides of the road, and keep in mind, the road is about 3, 4, 5 times wider than what we see over here. You would have had shops, stalls along both sides of the road. This is the center of Jerusalem from a spiritual perspective, from a communal perspective, also from a commerce perspective.
According to the Israel Antiquities Authority, the road took 10 years to build, from 20 to 30 AD, and was constructed by Pontius Pilate.
Isn't that great? I know. It's so much fun, like so much fun. And then you can just see it and you go, okay, now that makes total sense. Now, next will be a little video here when you go from the Pool of Siloam, and now you're going up the Pilgrimage Highway right there into to the temple. You'll come to the southern steps. This was just recently found, and these are steps that Jesus actually walked on. So watch this.
I'm walking down the steps on Temple Mount, beside the walls of the old city in Jerusalem. The Bible comes alive when you step foot in Israel, and that's certainly true when you visit the temple steps here in Jerusalem. It's amazing to think that Jesus would have walked up these very steps on his way to the temple. Herod the Great originally built these stone steps when he expanded the size of Temple Mount and rebuilt the second temple. Sometimes called the southern steps. These steps were originally a set of 30 steps that were 60 meters or 200 feet wide. It's interesting to note that the stairs are built in a unique repeating pattern of 2 steps followed by a longer landing. These steps were also known as the rabbi steps or the teaching steps, as there is a raised platform on the side of the steps. It's believed that this is where Jesus would often teach when he was in Jerusalem. It was also the place where rabbis and other temple teachers would give announcements or speeches to the people as they walked up this busy passageway to the temple. These broad steps led to enormous double and triple gates that you can still see. Jesus and Jewish pilgrims at that time would have climbed these steps and entered the gates that went through the magnificent passageways leading to the Temple Mount above. On the wall, you can see the massive stones that Herod would have laid for the foundation of the wall. Above them, you can see the smaller ones that were added after the destruction of the temple by the Romans in 70 AD. It's thrilling and inspiring to actually stand on the same steps where Jesus stood. This archaeological finding, excavated in 1967 by archaeologist Benjamin Mazar, verifies the Bible account of Jesus in Jerusalem and strengthens our belief in the story of Jesus. Neil Armstrong was the first man to walk on the moon. While visiting Israel, he asked his guide if there was a place where Jesus would have actually walked 2,000 years ago. The guide's immediate answer was the Southern Steps. When he visited these steps, Neil Armstrong is quoted as saying that this was more exciting a moment for him than walking on the moon.
There you go. So all of this is there. So when you read the Bible, you're like, okay, these are places that, like, if we read the Bible and there was no archaeology behind it, then we'd be like, I don't know if I really believe the Bible. But everything the Bible says is right there. Now, everything changed in Israel in 70 AD. Remember, the Romans came in. They destroyed Herod's temple. They killed about 1 million Jews. It was a really bad thing. But many of the Jews, when the Romans came in, they tried to hide underneath this road, and they just found this. So watch this.
Towards the end of the Second Temple period, Jerusalem went to war against the great empire of Rome. Thousands of people, fighters, and also civilians that survived, they escape underneath the ground into the drainage canal. And we found, under the pilgrimage road, the exact points, 5 points, where the Romans took sledgehammers and broke through the road and entered underneath the ground into the tunnel.
The wall of the drainage channel was missing, and that was an opening which allowed us to basically come from beneath and go above the drainage channel in order to begin the exposure of the street. I remember the first day when we crawled into that little opening in the drainage channel and we began to discover the edge of the street, and we realized what an important moment that was, because it was the moment where we could recreate what happened here 2,000 years ago.
There you go. That was, I'd never seen that before. All right, let's move to a more difficult site to figure out. This is the Pool of Bethesda. If you go to Israel today, this is what the old city pretty much looks like. It doesn't look anything like it did at the time of Jesus, so just know that. You can see the right side over there, that hectagon thing, that's the Dome on the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque down here, and then the southern steps right below it. If you go farther down, you'll see the Pool of Siloam, so kind of get your bearings there. Up top, north of that, is the Pool of Bethesda. Now, this is an amazing site. The problem is it is so incredibly confusing because through all the different time periods, you've got the Crusaders, they would build churches and build things over top of it, and then they build homes around. So to find what this is so confusing. Here was the problem. John 5:2, now there in Jerusalem near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed, and this is when Jesus went in and healed that one guy and said, like, do you want to be healed? And so this is the scene, but this is the Pool of Bethesda. Here's the problem. 5 covered colonnades, no one's ever found that. So they're like, oh, only the Bible says it, but it's probably not true. Until 1967, the pool was really, really evaluated, and they discovered that actually there were 2 pools. The pools were separated by a wall, and this is what gives us, here you go, the 5 different colonnades. You've got 1, the middle one is 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is the 5 covered colonnades. You've got the lower pool, which was used as kind of a mikveh, while the upper pool is the reservoir. It supplied the bottom pool with the water. Now, this matches exactly what John said, and no one, so that's what I'm saying. The Bible is backed by archaeology. Here's what this is.
Today we are in Jerusalem and we're gonna walk to the pool of Bethesda. Yes, that's right. This is where Jesus healed the paralytic man. And in a moment, we're just gonna go down those steps in the end, as you can see, and we're going to see the remains of what is believed to be the very pool with the famous steps that, like people 2,000 years ago, would have taken down to go to the water to get healed. Now, you might have heard about this miracle. It's recorded in the New Testament where it says that there was a feast of the Jews and Jesus went up to Jerusalem and he comes to this pool that is called Bethesda and it's located by Sheep's Gate. Now, just for reference, here's where the Sheep's Gate is believed to be, and here's where we are. And so, according to the scriptures, this pool had these amazing waters that at certain times they would get stirred up and the people with disease rush into the waters and get healed. But then there was this certain man who was a paralytic for 38 years. And whenever the waters got stirred up and they were ready for healing, all the people would rush in and he would always miss his opportunity. He's a paralytic, he couldn't walk, and that was kind of his life of misery. But then Jesus comes and heals this man without any waters, just by faith. So this man gets healed instantaneously. He gets up and walks. So after Conrad discovered it, about 100 years after, in 1964, more archaeological work was done here, and they found lots of different layers of ruins. Crusader churches, Byzantine, Hadrian's temple, healing pools of Asclepius, and when you look at this place, it's all kind of mixed up because everything built on top of each other. So it's really hard to tell what you are seeing here without a tour guide. Okay, so it finally made sense out of all of it. We found this article written by Urban C. van Walde, where he explains that the original pools were much, much larger. What we see here today is only a fraction that's been excavated. And the reason why we can't go and excavate farther is because those sections are under people's houses. That means we only can see a fraction of the pools, and they are much bigger. But now that we know its location, it would have stretched all the way from here to here, which is exactly 130 yards. And this also explains why when Rhoda and I were standing right here, we could see plaster on this wall, but not on this. This wall doesn't have plaster because the pool goes all the way here. It continues. So the plaster is only going to be on these edges and somewhere under this building.
That's, if whenever we see plaster, it means there was water here. And we see ancient walls.
So now that we know the history checks out, and this is the most likely candidate, it is amazing to still see.
Yeah, if you ever go there, it's really fascinating. Okay, let's move on to now, where did Jesus die on a cross, and where was his tomb, and where did he rise from the dead? If you go to Israel, you are going to be told two different options. There's two different places people think it happened. Here's the two possibilities. One is under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Remember, anytime there was like a site, a biblical site, somebody would come in and build a church over top of it. If you go to Bethlehem, you'll see a church over top of the site where Jesus was born. Like, this is just what they did to preserve these sites. So they built, I'll show you what the Church of the Holy Sepulchre looks like. But most people, I'm one of them, this is the site I believe is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre because it just makes sense when we go through it. But here's what, and then the second one is called the Garden Tomb. Most tour guides will take you to that, tell you that that's the place. It's beautiful, it's serene. I'll show you a video of that too. So let's see, what was I going to show you? Okay, here's what you need to understand first off when we're talking about where Jesus died and rose from the dead. Jerusalem looked different in the time of Jesus than it does today. So we really need to get that. Like, if you go to Jerusalem today, it looks nothing like it did in the time of Jesus. The city, if you look at the city walls today, those are not the walls that were around the city when Jesus was here. Remember, Rome came in and destroyed it. It's been built up. It's been torn down. The walls around the city were built in the 1500s. So we're talking, a lot's happened since then. But here is what I want you to see. Look over there to the left. What you need to see is the Pool of Siloam down there, so you can kind of get your bearings. You can see the Pool of Bethesda up to the top. At this particular time, this is the temple. This would have been Herod's temple. This is the temple that Jesus taught in. And then they had a wall around the city. If you look at the cross to the left, and that is where today, modern day, the Church of the Sepulchre, Holy Sepulchre sits. So It was outside the city walls. Back then, if you killed someone or someone died, you did not bury them inside the city walls. So where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre today is, it was outside the city walls without the church. There was no church there. If you look to the right, in 70 AD, when Rome came in and destroyed it, I'm not sure which Herod or who it was that added on, probably for protection. Then the Church of the Holy Sepulchre ended up inside that last, wall. So, but like you can see, when Jesus was around, where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was outside the city wall. That's really, really important. Now, if you look at today, here is what it looks like. Jerusalem in Jesus' day, it was all in the gray. And you can see the bottom red X. That is where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre sits today, but that's where I believe Jesus was crucified back then. The garden tomb is farther up. They'll say it's outside the city wall, and people go, oh, that's cool, this must be it. Not the same wall. So you gotta understand what's going on there. Okay, so let's look at, most tour groups are gonna take you here. They're gonna take you to the garden tomb, most of you that went there. Did they take you to both places? Did just this one? Makes me so frustrated. I'm going to become a tour guide. I'm going to become an archaeologist. I'm going to become a tour guide, okay? So this is what it looks like, and it's very serene and beautiful, and they say there's a garden, and this is where it was. Here's a 20-second video on it really quick.
This beautiful and peaceful garden tomb is situated just outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. It is considered by many Christians to be a possible location for the crucifixion and burial of Jesus in a stone tomb.
It's not, but anyway, just want to show you that. Okay, so we're devoting 20 seconds to that. Here's the deal. The garden tomb was discovered about 1,800 years after Jesus. And if you have our Holy Land book, we actually put both places in there just because we know tour groups are going to take you to, well, they should take you to both. The garden tomb was discovered about 1,800 years after Jesus' resurrection. The tomb's history is based on a whole lot of speculation. In the mid-1800s, it was decided that a nearby rock ledge looked a lot like a skull. If you look at that rock ledge, you can kind of see, like, there's two eyes, you kind of feel, and so since it was, Golgotha, the skull, they're like, there it is, that's where Jesus was crucified. Soon, excavations found remnants of an ancient garden, so they're like, okay, this is it. Wine press from the Second Temple period. By the late 1880s, years after the tomb was uncovered, it was being passionately supported by many Western Christian leaders as the spot. They were using metaphor and typology interpretation of Scripture to support their view. While everything seemed to potentially fit the biblical account, the science didn't quite agree. Modern archaeology has determined that the age of the tomb is from somewhere between 5th and 8th century BC, before Christ. While the speculative puzzle pieces fit together rather nicely, one of them didn't, meaning this was not a new tomb in the time of Jesus, but was already hundreds of years old. Look at John 19:41. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb. Not a tomb that was, hundreds of years old. Because it was the day of the Jewish preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. So what John tells us is that where Jesus was crucified is very, very close by to the tomb. Now, this is why I think this fits better. Now, here is, to give you your bearings, if you look at pictures of Israel, there's the Dome on the Rock right there, the Muslim site. Behind that, in the circle, is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's got blue roofs on it, on the dome, the blue domes. That's how you know that it's there. Remember, that was outside the city walls at the time of Jesus. But remember, you got to lose all the buildings and all the houses and all that stuff. So this is what it would have looked like in the days of Jesus. Here's the Jerusalem western city walls over here. This is a rock quarry. So there's this big rock. Remember, they would crucify people up high so that people could see them. So most likely Jesus would have been crucified on this rock. We'll see it. It's in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Jesus' tomb is very, very close by. There would have been a garden there. The garden, it's a rock quarry, so I'm like, how is there a garden? Galen Wiemers, in his book Jerusalem, he says, the abandoned quarry was covered with reddish-brown soil in the hundreds BC, before Christ, to create a garden. The area also supported cereal crops. I was thinking like Lucky Charms, Cocoa Puffs. I was like, I don't even know what cereal crops mean except that. And an orchard of fig, carob, and olive trees. So here is a quick little model of what this looked like at the time of Jesus.
Again, some of this has been found, but especially what is called the lithostratus have been discovered. The stone pavement that actually is mentioned in John 19. It very well could be that Jesus faced Pontius Pilate here and was sentenced unto crucifixion. So he would have, that is, Jesus would have carried his cross from that palace after the final sentencing, and he would have carried it to the Holy Sepulchre area. This is where the Holy Sepulchre Church is today. It was outside the wall, but originally this was a quarry. And you can see it displayed here outside what is called the second wall, as described by Josephus. Here it is again. Jesus was crucified here and buried as well. Okay, so here is like your timeline. 33 AD, Jesus dies, rises from the dead. 70 AD, the Romans come in, destroy the temple, destroy everything, destroy Jerusalem. When Constantine legalized Christianity, the first church built at this site was constructed by his mother, Helena. So he sent his mom, Helena. She's the one who did over Bethlehem, for where Jesus was born. Built this site constructed by his mother, Helena, around AD 325. This is the oldest site to be venerated by Christians as the tomb of Jesus. Before the church was built by Helena, the Romans had constructed a pagan temple here, perhaps in an effort to erase the memory of the place from Christianity. Now, to me, that makes the most sense. I'm like, okay, if the Romans put a pagan temple over this very, very important site, that tends to make me think this probably is the right site. So let's talk about this church. This is what I say. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre sits over two sites, Golgotha, Calvary, and the tomb of Jesus. Now, here's the picture of it right here. If you have gone to Israel and have gone to this place, it made me almost lose my faith in Jesus. Like, I've never seen such religion, such, little, crosses and this and that and artifact. It's just like so mind-blowing to me, and it hurt my heart, actually. I was just like, I can't do this. But here's the deal about this church. It's split into some different sections. The Roman Catholics have one section. The Greek Orthodox have another section. The Armenian Christians have another section. It's cluttered from relics, from centuries, relics all over the place. But here's the kicker. The doors of this church have been opened by a Muslim since the 7th century. Everyone fights over this place. So they just said, okay, we're going to get someone who's not even from a Christian religion. And since the 7th century, a Muslim every morning opens the doors to that church. It's fascinating. Now, we've been to Israel 4 times. We have never, ever gone in to see the tomb of Jesus, ever. It's a madhouse in there. Like, I wish I could go back now again, because now that we've done this series, I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, it makes sense to me now. It kind of didn't back then. The tomb of Jesus is under this big edifice. Now, you're going to have to really go, this structure wasn't there. The church wasn't there. Nothing was there at the time. Now, both of these sites, like I said, are underneath this particular church. Galen Wiemers puts it like this. Here's the 2 blue, domes at the top. So this is the church. When you walk in, Calvary, where you'll see it, it's enclosed in glass. That's off to your right, and then you'll go to the left to that big edifice, structure, and underneath there would be the tomb. So I want you to see what it looks like inside of this church for both of these places. So here you go.
Nothing compares to this site, which is venerated since the 4th century, since the identification or the verification made by Queen Helena. Her son then builds a magnificent church over it. It has been modified many times since, like this entrance is a result of the Crusaders' restoration. But inside, you still have those 2 pivotal spots, the Golgotha and the tomb. The site over here is identified since the 4th century as the Golgotha Skull Hill, Calvary.
The place of the skull.
The place of the crucifixion of Jesus. When Queen Helena Augusta came here and the local bishop Macarius showed her this place, it was authorized by her, and then Constantine made this big church over it, venerated to this day.
Lay out what this would have looked like 2,000 years ago at the time of the crucifixion.
You need to remove the whole building, all of this decoration. You are standing inside a garden, and then a high hill, which can still be seen. Come, let's take a closer look here. You can see the exposed rock behind the glass.
People see the cross here, the kind of reenactment, but they're pretty positive that this was about the positioning of the cross.
Not about. This is it. This is the very spot, because here you have the rock, and here in the middle, you see this silver frame.
Yeah.
If you put your hand there, Eric, there's a big indentation, like a hole, which goes into the rock. Wow. This, by Christian faith, is the very place where the vertical cross was placed, was positioned, and the crucifixion was right above.
It seems that most archaeologists believe that this is the spot where the crucifixion took place. Why do they believe that? And do you believe this is a very credible spot where it may have actually happened?
It's a very good candidate for the following reasons. A, it's a high hill. Any event happening here, the whole city will see it. And Romans wanted to punish people that were punishable in the most public way, so everyone else will be terrified and disciplined. This is a good place to do so. Everyone will see it, everyone will be terrified. No one will steal, and I'm reminding you, 2 thieves were crucified next to him. No one will claim he is the Messiah. It's bedrock. It's always been here. Rock doesn't grow. If it's here today, it was here 2,000 years ago, but street level was probably lower. So this is a good spot, again, to execute anyone in the most public way. Jews always, in all periods, always buried their dead outside the city. And this is so close to it, so it has to be also outside the city. The site of the crucifixion is a big natural hill of bedrock. It's always been there. And then, as an archaeologist, I can tell you that this tomb is typical to the 1st century. The tomb was new. And indeed, this tomb has only one ledge to put one body in, meaning it was just created. It wasn't enlarged yet for a whole family, as you usually see in tombs. On the following Sunday, the tomb was empty from the body of Christ, but it wasn't completely empty. There was an angel sitting inside telling them why it's empty, because he rose from the dead. And it tells us that he was sitting on the right side. And the ledge is on the right side. Look at the shape of this tomb, Eric. It has only one place to put one body, one ledge here on the right side. As the text tells us, it should have been on the right side. And a very important note, now it's all covered with marble and decoration.
Do you see why I hate the church? You can't tell anything what anything is. Everything has got all these decorations on it. But when you get down into it, you're just like, okay, this kind of really makes sense. Now, it's also worthy to note that in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, these are the two, we did actually see these. These are tombs in the back of the church, which these are 1st century tombs. And so this shows you what it would have been like back then, because these are actual tombs. But it shows you that this was outside the city, because people did not bury their dead inside the city. So this is kind of another thing that says, I think this probably is the place of the tomb. Now, the structure here had a problem. It has been kind of falling apart. I guess there was a lot of water damage. So just recently, archaeologists went in and cleaned and stabilized the tomb. No one had seen what was underneath that marble. Remember all the goofy stuff around there, and then you get the marble. It's like, that's not how it was. Jesus was laid on like bedrock, but no one had seen it for 200 years, and they just recently went in, and I guess they gave him 3 days to do this. All 3 of those, the Roman Catholics and the Armenians, they all got together and made one good decision, that they have to fix this or people can't go in it. So they gave him, I think, a 3-day period to go in and see what was under there. Is it bedrock or is it someone's just imagination? So here you go.
slab of marble on the top of what's believed to be Jesus' tomb has just been removed, and archaeologists are now analysing what's underneath it. The aim being, can they see at the bottom where the rock goes back to and date it back to the time of when Jesus would potentially have been around.
Our ground-penetrating radar would not work within the Holy Rock.
So I would like to
I'm
look at
amazed.
That's the goal for this week, to say this is it. This is the GPS point that was first found in the 3rd century AD. I mean, that's the weight of history in your hands.
It was fascinating. Once you get rid of all the church and all the goofy stuff all around there, you remove the marble, you see this is like bedrock. This is where they would have built a tomb. It's really amazing. So, all that to say, what do we say? Archaeology really does back the Bible. All right, let's move really quick to one last place here. Let's go to Caesarea Maritima. This is over on the Mediterranean Sea. A lot of things happened here. This is where Paul, when he was arrested in Rome, they took him to Caesarea. He took a boat from Caesarea to Rome when he was arrested, and because he really wanted to go to Rome, and so he did it on the government's money. But anyway, he stayed there in prison in Caesarea for 2 years. It's a beautiful, magnificent place. So watch this.
Caesarea Maritima. It's a truly amazing place. Herod the Great planned to build a perfect city as the political capital of the region. From the palace, the hippodrome or chariot racetrack, the ancient public lavatory, bathhouse, shoreline, promenade, Roman theatre and frescoes, to the magnificent harbour. It was a grand town. However, even though it was a luxury city, built along the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, there was one problem, and it was a big problem. There was no fresh water supply. So when construction began in 22 BC, Herod had an aqueduct built to bring fresh water to the city from the mountain springs 16 kilometers away. Today you can still see a section of the magnificent aqueduct. But it's the hippodrome that was the epicenter of this city. It was an exciting place of entertainment for the 30,000 spectators watching the Roman chariots race around the hippodrome. Behind it is the harbour, and it's considered to be a marvel of Roman engineering. 2 massive breakwaters that extend about 500 metres into the Mediterranean Sea were built to protect the ancient trading port. Until the summer of 1961, there was no evidence outside the Bible that Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect who sentenced Jesus to death, ever existed. Then a team of Italian archaeologists excavating the theatre here at Caesarea unearthed a limestone block from the 1st century, inscribed with a dedication to Tiberius Caesar from Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. One of the other significant events recorded in the Bible happened here in Caesarea. The Roman centurion Cornelius met with the Apostle Peter and became the first Gentile or non-Jew person to believe in Jesus. But today, the city is in ruins. According to Talmud records, much of the harbour and the beautiful coastal city of Caesarea was destroyed by a tsunami in 115 AD, and today it's a fabulous archaeological site in one of Israel's national parks.
Seriously, one of our favorite places. It's beautiful. One last thing, and then we will end.
For the first of our New Testament archaeology finds, we will cover the ossuary of Caiaphas. An ossuary is a bone box. Caiaphas was the high priest during Jesus' crucifixion, mentioned in Matthew 26:57. Was this a real person? Yes, it was. Archaeology and the Bible continue to support each other. Caiaphas' ossuary or bone box was found in 1990 near Jerusalem. Apparently they were trying to build a water park out there and came across a very ornate ossuary. His name is inscribed on the side of the ossuary. Interestingly, on June 29th, 2011, the ossuary of Caiaphas' granddaughter was also found. This find was backed by the Israeli Department of Antiquities. And these biblical discoveries continue to show up year after year.
So there you go. Here's what I say to end this. I'm saying this. When we see things like this, like the Bible says it, and then, dig under the ground, and there it is exactly like it says, I think we need to take the Bible really seriously. And if we do, it doesn't just become about like everything we've studied, prophecy and manuscripts and translations. What we begin to see is this is the Bible. This is God's very words to us. And what we've seen today is that the Bible is backed up by archaeology, which is why when you read the Bible, what we can see is that God preserved these sites underground for such a time as this, so that you and I, the archaeology, a lot of this stuff has happened within the last 20, 30, 40 years. People went 2,000 years without even knowing what was under the ground. And now, it's sometimes I think God is saying to us with every archaeological find this, pay attention to this book. Pay attention to it. And pay attention to the message. And the message is this. Salvation is through Jesus alone. That's it. And you must be born again. This is not just about I'm a good person and I'm sort of religious and I go to church every so often. This is about a spiritual birth that happens to us. And when it does, it changes everything in our life. And suddenly we are on this trajectory, this path of whatever I do, wherever we go, I am serving Jesus while I'm doing this. And what happens is the Holy Spirit comes into your life and he begins changing you. And what the ultimate thing is, he starts having us care more about the things of God than we do the things of this world. And that's kind of what happens. Next week, we are going to pull all of this together. We've spent 15 weeks about the Bible. And next week, we're going to come back with our final lesson on, now what do I do? How do I read the Bible? Okay, now we understand it, we got the timelines, but how do I read the Bible to get as much as I possibly can? Father, thank you so much. Thank you for all of these sites that we've seen today. God, thank you that it just reaffirms that you died on a cross for us and you rose from the dead. And I just thank you for all the places in Israel that we're digging up places where we can see that what you said really is true. I pray, God, that we will now move that into our personal lives. And God, if there's anyone here that needs to know you, I pray today's the day that they surrender their life to you. Thank you, God, for everything you've done for us. In Jesus' precious name, amen.